please.
Okay. Yeah, so the decision was to cover this group, actually call it the versatum group. And this is a few closely related species that are, kind of at the edges of a larger problematic group called what I call the versatum group. And they have many of the defining characteristics of the versatum group, but they're usually pretty recognizable by a couple of things. And I'm gonna maybe show, if I can share my screen, a PDF here. Where is it? So this is a PDF of kind of showing DNA barcode clusters. And I don't know if my mouse is catching up to where I am, but this big cluster in the middle is a species called trigeminum. And if you, I'm on the wrong computer. And right in the middle, there is a couple of specimens here that you'll see are called connexum. And you just can't, they look quite different, but you cannot distinguish them from DNA barcodes. They have different ranges. They're morphologically very different, but the DNA barcodes are basically identical. If I scroll, down here, this part of the cluster, you'll see two names, callidum and versatum, and it's the same situation. They're distinguishable. They have slightly different ranges. Really confident they're different species, but you cannot distinguish them at all by DNA barcode because they're identical. And if I go up a little bit, these two clusters, these two problematic clusters, are right next to what's called the versatum group, which is a complete and horrible mess. And if you try to identify versatum things with barcodes, you'll be frustrated. But right up at the top here is the other species we'll talk about a little bit today, which is admirandum. And even though admirandum is not that closely related to those two problematic clusters, it comes out very close in the key, the 2011 key to the dialect classification of the United States. So one of the things that kind of helps define this group is that if you look at the second metasomal tergum, they have pretty distinct, which is shown here. My mouse is kind of hovering, I think. They have distinct punctures all along that kind of posterior, kind of apical impressed margin of the tergum. A lot of the other members of the versatum group, they may have some sparse punctures and they might be impunctate. They have no punctures there. But they're really obvious and distinct in versatum, which is what this is.
Jason, can I interrupt for?
Of course.
Yeah. So Mitchell would often talk about in this general area the presence of that clear amber yellow rim to T2. Is that at all useful?
Yes. So if you look here, it's kind of a pale, almost reddish brown in versatum. But if we show admirandum later, you'll see it's like a really nice yellow. It's really clear, and that is something that I kind of look for in admirandum. It's a really nice, clear yellow kind of band. In other respects, they're very much like a typical versatum group thing. So the punctures are dense laterally, sparse medially on scutum. Nothing particularly weird going on. In terms, their heads are not long. They could be a little round, as we'll see. They have on T1, they have that apical impressed hair fan, but it's widely separated dorsally, so there's it's kind of two patches. But this whole kind of complex is kind of, the versatum complex is kind of distinctive by not being distinctive for the most part. So if you start, let me share the key. If I can find it.
Jason, while you're doing that, another question. Mitchell had also mentioned that on the propodial triangle, there was that a distinctive, I'm going to call it a rim, but sort of a raised area, vague. But is that something that you use or consider any longer?
Yeah, for you know, for versatum, I will look at the the propodial triangle or the metapostomonum, whatever you want to call it. But that's a high level of practice. I think you'd have to look at to sort of recognize that.
Okay.
Okay.
It's worth noting that there's a lot of variation in the propodium sculpture within species. It can vary quite a lot, so it's not always reliable.
Got it.
Yeah, there was some confusion. So in Mitchell, this species would be called Rorei, and what I would call callidum, he called versatum. So there's a bit of confusing there. So like the definition of what versatum is changed in 2010 when I did my revision, and partially I can forgive him for that because if you look at the type specimen of versatum, which is in Illinois, it's slightly non-traditional in terms of it's a little bit in that variation kind of range. And so I looked at that specimen a lot. And and I still would like to look at it again, but no, it's so there was some confusion there and slightly problematic because the type specimen of callidum is a male, which makes life more difficult. So the characteristics are a distinctive aspect of callidum is characteristics of the female mandible and the female trochanter, and so you're trying to make that sex association, which is a bit of sketchy. Anyway, where was I? Did I share my screen? I can't remember if I shared this one. Let's see. Trying to share. I can stop sharing. Share and then have a promise. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is the key. And the figure at the top, you can sort of see that hair patches. That's what we're kind of talking about. Fairly typical Eastern dialectus. And the first species that that kind of comes out in the key in this complex is callidum. And this is that kind of wide trochanter at the top. The first trochanter is wider than normal, and the mandible has this unusual kind of bend where it goes from wide at the base to narrowly constricted mid length. That's pretty typical of callidum. And maybe if you have one on deck, Sam, we can sort of see what that.
Yeah. So I'll switch, but I will say that I sometimes have a rough time with the mandible projection. It seems to be pretty variable. Like the one you're showing is at the extreme. Like I wish most things were like that. Usually it's maybe half that size in terms of its departure from the carina of the main mandible. So can be problematic. I use a suite of things when I'm doing it, but is that your experience? Like that would be a great if they all showed that, but I don't think they do.
Well, it's less obvious when the mandibles are closed, but I think the danger which we'll come to is making sure that you're not looking at a trigeminum.
Right.
Things get.
All right, I'm gonna share, and I have a trochanter on deck, and let me focus here on my ability to share anything. Okay, here we go, And let me raise it up. All right. So it might be, maybe it needs to be pivoted a slight bit, but you can see, in my mind, this is a really clear callidum trochanter. Oh, sorry, we'll make it big. Yep. Maybe we'll make it big. There we go. You can't see the cutout right here because whatever these hairs are in the way. But that's sort of a classic. And I kind of look, when I'm looking at these things, that this piece here is about almost as wide as it's where it joins with the femur. Whereas it's really skinny in the and uniformly skinny throughout when we're looking at versatum and admirandum, and then trigeminum kind of in between.
And another thing to look for is that on callidum, the outer face of the trochanter is also very flat and actually almost concave. So it's almost like dish shaped in the middle. Whereas
when you say outer face, is this the one? Is this the one, the correct one?
Facing the camera. It's like the face, like facing the
camera.
Oh,
I see. Okay, the flat
other
face.
species, the trochanter will be like more rounded, more cylindrical, like
Uh-huh.
femur and tibia.
Like someone took the trochanter and smashed it with a pair of pliers.
Exactly. Well, I mean, if you did that, it would shatter into a million pieces. So
right, you're very literal.
Clay and you
you're very literal, Joel. If it was made out of clay.
Yeah.
Great.
All right. Anything else you want me to look at on the specimen, Jason? You want to look at the Clypeus?
I'm gonna show something that I have, and then if you want to get maybe the face shape.
Okay. All right. You switch over, and I'll get that in view.
But I wanted to show it's a species that doesn't really occur in the east. It's more of a Texan species. And it's focus. This is connexum, and I was telling Sam before the workshop started that it's like callidum on steroids. So if callidum has a wide front trochanter, callidum is like connexum is really wide. And I think it's a little clearer on my, because it's kind of coming from a different ocular, what I see in the camera. Oops.
It's a little dark.
You just spell that because we don't.
But you can I think you can sort of see.
Oh yeah, that's a good view. It's a little bit out of focus, but it's a good view.
So this is like, you can see this is the front trochanter here, and it's really wide. It's almost like if it was clay, like someone has pulled the bottom, kind of stretched the bottom out, and you can kind of feel that kind of like concavity that Joel was talking about is even more obvious in connexum. There's like, it's kind of like a little thumbprint, and then someone tugged it out. So that's pretty typical. And I think I might be able to, without changing the view, give you a sense of the mandible. You see in the bottom, I'll try to adjust the light maybe a little bit. A little bit wonky, but you can kind of see, I hope, the base of the mandible here, and there's this kind of curve right here that narrows, and so that character of callidum is also present in connexum. And if you remember that barcode tree, they barcode separately, so they have distinct barcodes. This is not just an extreme specimen of callidum, but only those two species have those two characters. So it's really weird. But this is connexum is something you can expect to find in Texas. callidum is very widespread in the east. Kind of gets just into southern Canada. Okay, and maybe a nice feature of to recognize callidum too is the shape of the face. So if you have that, say,
Yeah. Shouldn't they call it connects us?
because it's a noun.
No, because it's from Texas.
Oh, connects us from Texas. That's a good reason to raise dialectus back up to G.
All right, can you see that?
I see your face, which is nice.
Pardon? Do you see the specimen, or did I share it properly?
No.
Oh, I did. Okay, I'll try again. And now?
Yep,
Okay.
this is callidum.
This is the same specimen. Jason, you want to take it from there and
Yeah.
take us, or Joel?
Well, if a typical dialectus has kind of like a semi-triangular kind of head almost, where the clypeus kind of sticks out at the bottom, we'll see something from at random in a bit. In callidum and also in connexum, the clypeus doesn't really protrude very far below kind of a tangent below the compound eyes. If you sort of drew a line connecting the compound eyes at the bottom, it's kind of upper left here. It kind of almost runs along the apex of the clypeus, which gives the face kind of this round shape. And that's kind of a good sign that you're not dealing with admirandum or versatum.
Yeah, it's very short face. But again, it's one of those things that in absence of a lot of experience, you keep you might second guess an awful lot. So it's like this combination of things that you're going to want to look for. Do you use a tegula color at all?
Yes. In versatum, it tends to be kind of a reddish brown, whereas in some of the other ones, it's kind of a more of a honey colored. Keep having pop-ups.
I would say with this clypeus character, it's also not so much that the face is short, but more like just the clypeus is short.
Okay.
So like the overall face shape is pretty similar to like versatum and like viridatum group species, but then just the clypeus is so much shortened that it's like the bottom of the face is like cut off, very straight edged.
Are you talking about like head, like actual absolute measurements, or like the ratio?
I'm kind of just talking about like overall appearance.
Yeah, I would agree that when you're vibing it, it's not that the head is a whole lot different. It's just that this clypeus is stubby, the clypeus edge.
And
All
that's
right,
not,
you guys.
not unique.
I'm going to share.
Okay. Do you want me to get something else on deck or not?
Yeah, if maybe maybe a scutum if you've got one, maybe either an admirandum or versatum or anything really.
You
I'm
want
just
a
gonna
scutum of
Yeah.
versatum?
anything
Did you
will
say-
do.
Okay. All right. Well, we can use this specimen then, probably. Well, no, that's got a pin in it.
So
Okay,
this is
got it.
this is to contrast with what we just saw. So this is an admirandum face, and this is kind of a more typical viridatum group face shape. So this is much more kind of triangular, kind of the clypeus kind of protrudes well below that kind of line at the base of the complex. So otherwise relatively similar, in terms of puncture density, coloration, this will have a normal mandible, a normal trochanter, so you can recognize it from callidum that way. But this face is even like the clypeus is stretched out even more so than versatums. You can kind of see maybe what we were talking about a little bit. It's been, it's not back to lines. The kind of the color of the tegula, the kind of honey colored, kind of pale, translucent. So you're looking for that too.
But that won't help tell it apart from trigeminum. Only versatum and callidum.
And then you have to be careful. Like you'll take a look at the specimen I'll show that's clearly a callidum, but it's got a pretty blonde tegula. But when I show it on, you'll see.
And this is still the admirandum, and this is the kind of contrast what we saw on the first slide. So this is that really kind of yellowy, translucent kind of margin of the tertium. In true admirandum, it seems to be quite yellow. Whereas in some other related groups, it's often less distinct. And you can't see it in this view, but admirandum is also very well punctured along that impressed area of the apex. So there are punctures here. You just can't see them in this view right now.
Also, yeah, go ahead. I was going to say that the aconarial fan is more complete, moves more towards complete than the others.
Another thing that you'll sometimes see here is that it's quite shiny and smooth on the first tertium, that sort of anterior surface. So I kind of like, if you have the fan there, I'm kind of looking at the area, kind of like space above it. You know, it's quite smooth, whereas some other species that you might encounter, like Hitchin's eye, tends to have kind of like that fingerprinted kind of surface sculpture on it. So the admirandum is quite shiny, smooth. If you want to show whatever you're showing a callidum.
Yeah, I'm showing a callidum scutum, right?
Okay.
Is that what you're interested in?
Yep, that's perfect.
Oops. All right, let me get it into focus again. You can see in this one, like I did a double check, but so it is a callidum, but the tegula is definitely not dark, and this is where all these things sort of can blend a little bit. You want me to just focus in the middle of the scutum?
Yeah, sure. Also checking what I've got community next. So the like I would say that there's nothing unusual about the scutum, particularly of these. So there's just kind of a gentle kind of curve from the tegula over the top, back down to the other tegula. It's kind of flat in the medial part, but not especially unusual. The punctures are just kind of, consistently sized. You can see it's kind of got some microsculpture there, maybe a little bit more polished, and that's in the sort of submedial area, kind of between the midline and perhaps the lines, but it's kind of sculptured. Nothing else really to show. I'll try to. I have a versatum up now.
Okay.
Shared. Nope. Okay. Not really what I want to see it. Again. Okay. So you can maybe you'll believe us that this is slightly more reddish brown, the kind of honey colored tegula of the other species. It's really hard to get this in like a two-dimensional view, but to me, versatum, the scutum is more flat. it's got like a distinctly kind of flat appearance, kind of right across the parapsital lines, and the punctures are very fine between the parapsital lines and the tigula. And so it has like a slight. So you can identify, you can distinguish a versatum from a callidum from a trigeminum just by the scutum, because it's a slightly different. You don't want to do that.
I would also, yeah.
But,
I would also add in there that my impression is that the versatums often have a more olive tint to the scutum,
yeah.
and therefore to the bottom, and that they tend to be larger a little bit when you're dealing with a million of them.
Yeah. So it is, versatum is what I would call a fairly large dialectus. So it's about 6 millimeters. There's always, if you have a long series, you'll occasionally get a small versatum that's like 4.5 millimeters. So you have to be cautious using size alone. But my sort of thing is that big species are always big, small species are always small, but big species big species are usually big, small species are always small, but big species are occasionally small. Yeah, it's just a nutritional. I kind of moved this down a little bit just to show that shape of the propodium, and the sculpturing. You can sort of see those kind of wrinkles kind of going right towards the apex. There's kind of a thinly, pretty distinct margin at the apex. Well, I think you were talking about earlier, Sam.
Yeah, it's like a berm.
Yeah. And so it's slightly different than what you might see in like an admirandum, but it takes some practice to learn. Yeah. I think maybe if you have the capacity to bring up maybe a trochanter from a versatum or something like that that's normal, and then I'll try to bring up a trigeminum. So the name trigeminum kind of means triplet in Latin, and that's because it's callidum and versatum you can't tell apart from barcodes. Trigeminum you can, but it's kind of like if you took a callidum halfway between a callidum and a versatum, that's what you get a trigeminum, which is really annoying because the face shape is more like, is almost a callidum kind of face shape, in that it's not very, the clypeus doesn't stick down very far. The trochanters are maybe a little wider than they should be. You might if you looked at it, you might think that, oh, maybe this is like a worker callidum, but the DNA evidence suggests that they're not the same. So I will try to find them. And they tend to be smaller, quite a bit smaller than versatum.
And often bluer, I would say.
I think in the key I might have referred to them as being kind of shiny on the scutum, but I think that's probably wrong. They do have some microsculpture.
It does tend to be less microsculpture than versatum, though.
Yeah. Maybe I should have pointed that out while we had the versatum up there. Show the scutum microsculpture. So this is, if I can get it a little bit more in focus. This should be, in theory, a trigeminum. So the clypeus sticks out a little bit, but not very strongly. So it would be, you'd be forgiven. This is kind of more almost in line with what you see in a versatum. Nothing particularly unusual about it. sometimes they have a little bit more kind of like momentum on the face than you might expect to see in the others. This is just kind of a crazy angle. So this is another trigeminum, and there's quite a bit of kind of white kind of hair there on the face. Again, kind of a round shape with the clypeus kind of protruding just a little bit. That's a callidum face. And you can kind of see the tegula kind of out of focus. They're kind of honey colored again. And these are a little bit more southern. So like callidum barely gets into southern Ontario. Trigeminum I've never seen in Canada that I can recall. Versatum kind of gets into southern Quebec, southern Manitoba. So its range extends a little bit farther than the other three. Admirandum is kind of a northeastern. We seem to get it in Manitoba reasonably commonly. And then Connexum is like Texas. So the callidum kind of goes down. I don't know how far south it gets, but I don't know, Virginia would be common, I guess.
Callidum?
North Carolina, I guess. Down Carolina.
Well south. Also, a couple times I've seen something that I labeled as admirandum or near admirandum well into Florida, which seemed to be out of its normal range, but is like that kind of has to be what it is. One of those situations.
Admirandum, like once you start getting into like the versatum group proper, it's a mess because there's a bunch of other species that look similar. Very recently we sort of started recognizing a species called absimile, which is a sandhouse species. And it seems to be actually fairly common in Manitoba, in Wisconsin, Minnesota. I think the type is probably from Colorado. Yeah, I think the type of admirandum is probably like Massachusetts or something. So that's kind of where admirandum is.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right.
Oh, no.
And versatum the type is from Illinois. Callidum might be in the Carolinas.
So that the new one, whatever you call it, absintha or whatever, is it absimile? How would you characterize that one?
It's kind of like a shiny admirandum, a small shiny admirandum. So I think the first long series I saw of it was maybe Hannah Gaines material from Wisconsin, and I was like, the puncture density on T2 is a little sparser, and it's quite smooth. The face is less kind of triangular, maybe a bit more, but nothing weird. It's not round like a trigeminum. It's kind of nondescript. It kind of looks like a Ephialtum, to be honest, but with pale tegula.
The T1 especially is very shiny.
Uh-huh.
One and the scutum are both quite shiny in absimile.
Sounds ugly.
Yeah, so it's the versatum group would take. I mean, I still haven't figured it out. So
yeah,
I wouldn't be supremely confident in identifying members of that group. If anyone wants to do a grad degree,
would they graduate though?
Yeah.
I have a trochanter on deck. It's actually oblongum because I couldn't find a specimen that wanted to show its
sounds good.
Thing there. So let me move to share. And this is, pretty oblong. They all should be pretty standard. Like most of the trochanters are going to look like this. Moving up here. Did I just share or did I not share?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. little bit oblique, but you know, it's basically, I always think of it as almost as it's super skinny and about uniform with a slight taper towards the end instead of some kind of big carve out as the connexum callidum group does. And you know, trigeminum is a little wide, so that's one key that I look for if I'm like, is it possibly an admirandum? I look and see it if it has something like this, it's like, okay, that's in the admirandum column for sure. Anything you guys want to say or see any more on these?
Not too particularly, but yeah, when you start getting into the versatum group, you know, it's a lot of gestalts. You're looking at hair patches, how shiny or dull puncture densities. It's really tough. And we're still working on where to draw the lines. It's going to be really sad if there's actually more undescribed species in that group than we currently recognize. I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm hoping that's not the case, but you know, there's a lot of weird levels. And you know, who knows?
Yeah, have you guys been able to put a time period in which a lot of this diversity was created? Are we talking last glacial period or what? What are the thinking drivers dates?
I don't know if we have that answer yet. I mean, Joel has been working with Michael Brandsetter on like a new phylogenomics data set, which we hope to have out next year. So we're doing some final analyses. And I actually have some, you know, building a data set just on the versatum group with like UCDs, phylogenomic data, more to kind of look at it from the taxonomic side.
Yeah.
Because you basically barcodes aren't going to help. So we're going to try to see if or not you can use. Not going to be useful, particularly useful for identification for the average person, but if we can figure out where the boundaries are, maybe we can find some better characters.
And according to this data set, the versatum group definitely is a crown group of Dialectus.
So it's young.
So it's almost certainly pretty recently evolved, which would explain why the barcodes are not so helpful in distinguishing them.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a
time to separate into lineages?
So when you say relatively recent, what's the ballpark there in terms of number of years ago?
I think North American Dialectus is probably like 20 million years. So
okay.
So,
yeah,
you know,
I mean, there's a lot of diversity in Dialectus, but let's say versatum group.
I have to bring up I have to bring up a tree to show that. I don't think we've officially dated that cluster. So I don't have I don't have a good number like 5 million years or 3 million years. I don't have a good number like that. But we could probably extrapolate the age of this series.
So it may have something to do with serial glacial events separating and rejoining populations.
Yeah,
type of thing.
If you believe, like one species I described was Lasioglossum sabelensi, which is like endemic to Sable Island. But Sable Island is like only, you know, it's measured in the thousands of years, not millions. So it's a really recent island.
Well, but isn't it essentially a residue of the Pleistocene continental shelf, last glacial period isolation? So Sable Island is relatively recent, but that it's probably just the last bit of the whole complex that occurred during the glacial maximum. No, maybe. Who knows? Yeah. So it could have been down in Maryland, for example, at glacial maximum. And when the Maryland went another 100 kilometers into the ocean with land, when all that ice sucked up everything, and who knows what kind of islands and stuff, but for certain there would be a dune line like there is currently, you know, but it may look more like Sable Island, and it would have been about the same temperature.
You're making me feel better about describing that species safe. So,
okay. Yeah, I've been writing up bees of Maryland, as you know, and got into where did all the sand bees come from. And an interesting thing is, so Sable Island was mostly sand, so you could claim Sabelense is sand, but almost all the other species in the east, in Maryland, are southern sand specialists. And a lot of sand specialists don't, you can disabuse me of this. Sand specialists really don't get that far into Canada and in the east. Now in the Midwest, you have Midwestern stuff around the Great Lakes, but what, if anything, gets into the taiga tundra areas, there is sand up there. But the clade as a whole is a southern group and seems to invade north, but not like many species which have a northern aspect and they just get pushed to the north. I don't see a pattern of northernness in that group. And that's why Sabelensis was particularly interesting, because it seemed to be this exception.
That's really interesting. But before I get to this, I just wanted to show what is on the screen right now. That is a trigeminum and a trigeminum trochanters. So a little bit wider perhaps than the oblongum that we just saw.
Certainly.
But not as insanely wide as the callidum, or certainly not the connexum.
Yeah, and when you don't spread your mandibles, it's problematic and difficult sometimes, and eats up a ton of time to try and figure out whether the carina are parallel or nearly parallel, or whether it's a little bit, like if you have a kind of fat trochanter like that, and you have the, a hard to see mandible, then you really are going to go back to looking at the that facial edge, the clipial edge, to see whether it's bumped out a little bit, because boy, I've spent a lot of time, and sometimes it just becomes species, but working on that group.
So on that note, I was wondering if we could go through some of the language that is actually used in the key, like that might be more obscure. So if we could look maybe at a callidum mandible that's not been pulled, maybe the mesoscutum polished posteriorly, or with the microsculpture, just to walk through some of the things that when they're looking at the key, they'll see.
I've not used I recall that too, the scutum microsculpture for any of that group, but
yeah, they're all kind of dull kind of sculpture. Admirandum is quite sculptured. Versatum is certainly, maybe trigeminum a little bit less so. Trying to sorry, I'm just trying to find an answer to your question. So based on the 2012 phylogeny, where versatum splits from platyparium in the tree, is about 5 million years, plus or minus. So
it splits from platyparium?
Yeah, about 5 million years ago.
Interesting. Yeah, I always think of platyparium as in that group, but just the parasite of that group, and it formerly was of that group. So that's interesting.
Yeah. So the only dated tree that I have has too sparse sampling. So like the separation from like the clade that includes Pilosum, Chrysonii, Zephyrus, etc. is probably, and I'm kind of eyeballing this, like 7.5 million years. So,
it's a while ago.
So a while ago, but yeah. But when you think within that 5 million year, you got to get Admirandum, Oblongum, Scotiae, trigeminum, versatum, all those. There's a lot of species. Yeah. Is there anything else we need to see? Claire, you wanted to talk about language, so let me.
Yeah, I'm just thinking a lot of people will have maybe watched this that are going to be going through the keys directly, and I think they've appreciated being able to take notes based on exactly what you published.
You can pull up the key maybe and just talk it through and see if there's anything to discuss in the key.
Okay, yeah, I have the key up. I'm just gonna try to share the right screen. I'll just go. Oh, did I not share?
Not shared.
Try again.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the beginning of the 2011 key. And if you're in the East, this is the one that you want to use. So they're nest building. The turga are kind of brownish, they're not red. They have these sort of oval kind of tegula. And the procophs are normal. They have a character that this would in these papers I refer to it as an acarinarial fan, which I was kind of following the Canadian Lasioglossum, but they don't really have associated mites, so ignore that word. But they have a T1 fan.
I have seen mites occasionally in that area.
Yeah, but I don't think there's like a. I don't think there's. I think you're more likely to see mites on the dorsal surface of the turga in that space.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they do have a fan, and they're not particularly coarsely sculptured. So we just kind of jump over to 12, and then we have the parapsidal lines are dense laterally. So we're going to go to 13. But they're sparse between the parapsidal lines. So, and then we start getting kind of, these are some sort of oddball species. Dispirale is kind of in the Great Plains. Foveolatum has this kind of an unusual thing with a distinct supraclavicular area, and the parapsidal lines are really wide. They're pretty uncommon. The heads are kind of
can also show up in the East, just
yes.
Very rarely in the South.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. And Mitchell, he referred to them as brassicae.
Yeah.
Mitchell. But they're in this key because they do occur in the East occasionally. So the fan is open. So we're kind of, so this is where we start getting into this kind of versatum group primarily. Droege is got this distinctive kind of sculpturing on the mesopisternum. And then here's where callidum kind of comes out early on with its sort of unusual trochanter. And then we kind of go to 20. You get rid of a
Connexum. Connexum would have come out too.
Yeah, Connexum would be there, but Connexum is just, it doesn't really get into the East very much. Maybe it might pop over the Mississippi, but I haven't seen enough specimens from, I guess, probably Mississippi, Alabama, these kinds of areas.
Did we talk about with callidum? Did we talk about if the mandibles are closed, that you can still sort of see that there's like sort of like a different shape on the outside edge, like the mandible on callidum will be like more sharply angled on the outside edge, like even if the mandibles are closed, you can kind of see that it's more of like a right angle bend in the mandible.
I'll try and pull up something like that.
And then
it's just the mandible as a whole is, I think, what you're referring to, right?
Yes, like even if you can't see like that inside edge bend, like the outside edge is still sort of it's still sort of bent. So it has kind of a different shape to it. It kind of follows like that short flat clypeus. It kind of follows the outline of that, where when the clypeus is more protruding, the mandible more gently curves to follow the line of the protruding clypeus when they're closed. So that's kind of like a general characteristic you can look for if the mandibles are closed.
So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. So this is the couplet where these three species that we kind of were talking about kind of come out. So 31, the apical impressed area with these sort of dense and distinct punctures. And that will lead you to trigeminum, versatum, and admirandum. And in the couplet here, versatum and admirandum have kind of a dull mesoscutum. That's pretty much all that connects them. Everything else is kind of variable, the rest of that couplet. By trigeminum has a little bit more of a polished scutum in part, pale tegula, and that clypeus not protruding very far. Admirandum, the clypeus protrudes quite a bit, but it's less so in versatum. I'll try to show a versatum face.
I also got a versatum scutum where you can see the dull microsculpture.
Oh yeah, if you want to show that, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That's the one species that I have on hand that is not upstairs being databased right now. All right, so here's a versatum. Actually, the colors are a little bit off, but you can definitely see in the middle of the scutum here, there's this really dull kind of imbricate microsculpture, and it's just as dull in the middle as it is up in this anterior region, so it's really uniformly dull. It doesn't get like much shinier in the middle, whereas like trigeminum, it usually does have some microsculpture, but it tends to be shinier in the middle and down at the back posterior region. It'll be shinier there.
I have that mandible thing up whenever you guys want.
Sure.
Right. Flip to there. Okay, so get this a little bit back into focus. So edge of eye, mandible base, tip is down here. And what we're looking at is literally the mandible itself, instead of being like, if you ripped it off, being relatively flat and straight, it comes and then and now it's curving around like here. This is a little bit difficult to show a good shot of it without it being obscured by other things, but the mandible itself is as if it were bent, actually, as if you push that tip in towards the head and it, like, instead of breaking it, it bends in like that. It's a little bit hard. So here you go. And when you're looking at this raised carina on the edge, it's, when the thing is closed, it's hard to see, but it would be up here somewhere. That's why the trochanter is your friend.
And the face shape as well for callidum.
Yeah.
I'm going to show a versatum face for completeness. So this, you can sort of see that the clypeus is distinctly kind of protruding down below the compound eyes, but it's not quite as a little wider. It's not quite as narrow as that admirandum style. It doesn't protrude as much.
Yeah, Claire, does anyone have any questions?
That'll be good.
You've overwhelmed them.
Yeah, so this is
Yes. That was a joke. Oh, the testation, like what's a narrow versus wide border?
On the T2 rim,
Yes, that's the other specific we didn't mention. Show. We saw a lot of the borders, but not the.
how many
Variety.
how many pits wide?
You're asking about how many punctures will be on T2?
No, I think
Okay,
it has
what-
to do with the colored rim, right? Is that what you're talking
Yes,
about, Claire?
The T2 apical pressed area with narrow testaceous border, or an admirandum, a wide border.
I don't know how wide it is, but it's very distinctively present. You know, I haven't tried measuring it to see, you know, how wide it is relative to the total length of the impressed area. But, you know, it's a distinctive yellow band.
However, the others can have a little bit of a yellow band, so
Yep.
that's the tricky thing. It's not like presence absence, it's more in terms of prominence. Again, these things become a suite of characters to build your identification, you know, spreadsheet.
So it shows a big bit of that. Oh, it's wanted to show something a little interesting. Thoughts? This is
What do you say?
I think he's talking to himself.
that happens a lot. So the one interesting thing about admirandum is
So I was wondering if you can show the fan, especially if the specimen is a bit worn. Always have trouble to tell the completeness.
Right.
Can you repeat it?
Jason, go ahead and complete your thought, and then if people want to see the acanarial fan, and I'll try and get one on deck.
so admirandum, the males are actually pretty unusual in that they tend to have yellow on the edge of the clypeus and yellow, quite distinctive yellow on the fore tibia. Whereas other members of that complex tend not to, at least in the east. So admirandum males are actually relatively distinctive. Most dialectus males don't have a yellow on the clypeus, and if they do, they don't look anything like that.
And are the I have to say that I almost entirely avoid trying to key out males. So, but do the clipial pits, are they also defining that group in the males?
Clipial pits.
The pit pattern on T2. No, sorry.
Oh,
The T2 pitting. I'm doing two things at once.
yeah. Certainly you can pull out, you know, versatum males very easily from others because they're quite large and they do have pretty distinctive punctures on the apex of T2. So if you have a whole bunch of males in that sort of versatum complex and you're having a hard time identifying them, that's normal, but you can definitely pull out some of this groups because they do have punctures. Yeah.
All right, so shall I share my screen and
Yeah.
I have a callidum fan, pretty typical of all three, trigeminum, callidum, and versatum have something like this, and it's useful in saying probably not an admirandum, in my opinion. So, oops, darn it. Okay, Evernote, big savings. Okay, so here we're looking at T1, and we're kind of peering down the front face of it. So here's the rim of T1 joining T2, and here is sometimes disguised, but fortunately, a lot of times the specimens droop their abdomens a bit, and you'll see be able to peer in there. Because if you do them sort of the traditional European way, you're not going to see that fan because it will be pressed up against the propodium. So here is a big wide gap across the top that has no hair. And yes, things can get goopy and things. They don't usually, my opinion is that these don't wear out. They're just hidden by other factors. Like, I don't think it's a big wear area, is it? So having these patches clearly separated wide, that seems very typical.
And then I'm going to show the add and random version of this. So that's what it looks like in add and random. So I think you can sort of see this opening right here. Air is kind of coming in. There's this open space.
Yeah, another experience thing, but does tend to the opening at the top tends to be a smaller than the distance of the width of the hairs on the side, but not super tiny like Levissimum or like Gotham, and certainly not complete, but it's just more. It's moving more towards completeness than the versatum trigeminum crowd.
And you can see that nice translucent rim on T1. It's also pulled on T2. Pretty good hair patches. Laterally on T2. On the show. I don't know if that's going to show up really well. Stangle. That's the sputum. You can't really see it very well from this angle, but it's microsculptured.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to bring to the attention, Lewis asked, what is the ecology of the mites found in the fans? And Joel responded that we're not sure, but in sensu stricto, they are mutualists that eat microorganisms in the pollen provision.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so some bees have mites that are not necessarily beneficial, but some bees like Lasioglossum in the strict sense, the subgenus Lasioglossum in North America have definitive associates. Like the bees are intentionally have evolved intentionally. They've evolved structures for the mites. And you see that in some carpenter's bees as well. And so presumably the mites are feeding on things like fungus, or maybe they're feeding on things that are inside the nest that are bad to the bees. The assumption.
Very cool. All right. And what are we going to do next week for our 100th episode?
Well, we were considering doing some of the common dialectics of the southwestern US. So specifically kind of ones that you might, if you ever take the B course, if you've taken it or you will want to take it, and then that they hold with the Southwest Research Station every year. Some of the dialectics that you'll find there. And a lot of these have not been treated in revisions or keys before, but they're recognized. So we'll try to, they can be common. So we'll try to give people some insight into those, including a species that Joel recently described, which was like the most common bee in the southwestern United States. That didn't have a name for till 2023.
Wow! Yay!
Totally wacky. And this is and maybe I'll tell a story of being swarmed by dialectics.
Being what? Sorry, I
Swarmed
missed
by
that.
dialectics.
Swarmed. I'm glad that you're made it through and are here today.
Thanks to everyone who
Thanks, guys.
sits through these things, because I know it's been intense.
Scintillating. Yeah, no, it's great. I really appreciate that. And I think I wish that we had these things years ago because it takes a while to ramp up. So that's the idea.
Full classroom worth of people in these meetings every week for 2 years.
Yeah.
Wild. All right. I'm turning off the recording now. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank